what would you do with a proto-AGI system in terms of architecting it or interacting with it so that as it evolves and modifies itself, it's more likely to sort of self-organize into something that's unconditionally loving. And if you go back if you go back to the early childhood example, like, I don't think you train your kids to be more loving either. Exactly. Training feels like you could train them to do a high jump. I don't think you can train them to be more loving, but you can certainly do things that will increase the odds of them evolving in that direction.
The word training doesn't quite fit. The word training suggests that you have this goal that you have achieved that you're then going to help this being to achieve, right? The problem is we haven't achieved the goal, and so we kind of don't know, right? And so this is an important question because we kind of don't know how to get there because we ourselves aren't there. And so this is definitely a calling from the future type question, I think. And so the word I would use instead is practice and focus, right? So let's assume we're starting with something like ChatGPT 4 attached to the OpenCog stuff, right? Let's assume we're starting with that. So there's components of the information. I'm going to just break it down simply because that's how I understand it, because I don't have enough technical understanding. So in my simple understanding, there are components involved with what information, let's call them practice data, what information the system chews on to know things about the world. What do you want to call that? I'll call it practice data. Is that reasonable?
Sure.
Okay, so there's that world of things that we can talk about what to do with that world of things. Another world of things is the programmers themselves, the developers themselves, what they choose to focus on when they are troubleshooting and interacting with the software. And then another world, it feels like there's a third world that has to do with the test cases. So what do you actually want this thing to be able to do? There's an infinite number of things that anything could be intended towards. So what intentions do you have? What kind of test cases do you want this thing to pass to feel like you're on the right track, or you can move towards the next step? And it feels like each of those things, so let's talk about each of those things. So each of those things could have an unconditionally loving sort of component with an intention towards moving towards AGI that is unconditionally loving. So with the practice data, using data that includes examples of human self-transcendence and non-human self-transcendence. So, and just the whole idea of self-transcendence, working together towards a positive good that gives people the feeling of flow, connection, and unity, right? So giving examples of that and giving examples of not that, and having a conversation about the distinctions between those. Like, why is it that sometimes, just really getting into the philosophy of why it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, and asking questions like how, motivating questions, assuming this thing has a motivating engine, a motivational engine, how does one motivate towards one or the other? So that's sort of like practice data. That the programmers or the developers themselves, I really see that there's this weird, I don't want to call it weird because it's probably has some kind of natural science explanation, but there is some currently mysterious relationship factor that has to do with the human and the technology that they're working with. And it's one operator of an AI can have a very different relationship that is non-physical and not based on the history, even if they used all the same interactive elements, than another operator of the AI. So the developers themselves need to be trained on unconditional love. When I say trained, I should use the word practice. They need to help practice and discuss unconditional love, almost like practicing meditation, right? And that could help develop this relationship on a non-physical level that is kind of mysterious, but it seems to be real. People talk all the time about how certain operators with certain technology have a real rapport, right? And others really don't. And then this third piece, which I've completely forgotten what it is, but I think is very important. Does anyone know what it was? It's down here. It's down here. Oh, it has to do with yes, I know, test cases. Yeah. So so developing test cases. So this is about focus also. This is prioritizing. Developing test cases for the AI to actually be or manifest unconditional love as expected according to the definition of unconditional love in its interactions, right? And so if it fails the test case, then like a kid, you could say, or a human, another person, you say, so it feels like you're not quite in the state that we're going for here. What's missing might be this, let's talk about it. But in order to get there to that, let's talk about it and let's help you develop towards this other piece. I've talked with Ben about this before, but I'll just reassert. I think it has to have an internal model of its own psychology. So it can reflect on, oh yeah, I guess I was not focusing on that. Or, oh yeah, I guess I did have a feeling or a whatever, a little value on my knob that went in that direction.
Isn't that introspection? I mean, isn't that...
Yeah.
So when we talk about consciousness having a
I think it needs to have an introspection so that you can, because otherwise you just you're saying, oh, set your kindness ratio to 0.3.